A lot of newcomers to the Witcher lore ask the question, why exactly Geralt is of Rivia? He wasn't born in this city. He spent his childhood in Kaer Morhen. He has no relatives in Rivia, and he rarely visited this place in the southeast of the mainland. But for some reason, White Wolf is known as a Rivian. All the legends, sagas, and stories about him start with his name, Geralt of Rivia. But why? Is it a coincidence? Or maybe we don't know something really important. Maybe it is his accent, or his look, or some special facial feature, or maybe all the legends are just fiction. Even in the last case, does Geralt really have no connection to Rivia except his name? Would this name be so famous then? Well, let us find out. You're listening to the All Witches Speak. This is a young YouTube channel, but we have many incredible stories for you guys. So hit the like button if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future content, and leave a positive or even a negative comment below, because our story begins. Geralt's name. Let's start with the early days of the White Wolf, because the root of all problems in the search for Geralt's hometown is his childhood. This childhood can't be called easy or happy. Instead of loving parents, the young Windblade was brought up by the stubborn and hard-hearted Witchers of Kaer Morhen. All of Geralt's days were filled with exhausting training and harsh words. Even more, the specter of the future always loomed before him, the terrifying trial of the grasses, when the Witcher apprentice lies down on the bloody table for experiments, when he is subjected to the horrible procedures, when the incredibly poisonous mutagens flow through his veins. They reach every nerve and change the structure of the human body and turn a human into a Witcher. When he understands that in the next hours he will feel unimaginable pain and has no guarantees that he will survive after all this torture. Geralt knew about everything, and he also knew that usually only 4 out of 10 boys survive the trial of the grasses. Not the best piece of knowledge for a normal boy, but he came to terms with it because he had just enough time and he had no other choice. By the way, instead of toys, Geralt had wooden swords, plus bruises, abrasions, dislocations, and fractures instead of gifts for good behavior. Finally, there was only one perspective in front of him. The perspective to become a lonely monster hunter without family, children, home, and money. The perspective to be despised by every God-fearing man. To become an exile from almost everywhere. To become a wanderer without a place in the world. This perspective had only one end. The Witcher would die from being backstabbed or hit by the fangs of some monster. The Witcher's body would be thrown into some mass grave or left to rot in some random ditch until being torn to pieces by the wild beasts. Well, the fate of a Witcher is quite unenviable. But while many other boys were forced to live the life of a Witcher by pure accident, due to the law of surprise, Geralt only got this way because his own mother did not want to raise him. She gave her little child to Vesemir, the master of the Witcher School of the Wolf, and simply disappeared from her son's life. The only thing she could give the child was his name, Geralt, and then she disappeared. So Geralt never really knew his parents, and this trauma stayed with him forever. Geralt grew up in Kaer Morhen. He learned his name, accepted Vesemir as his only and true father, and reconciled with his fate. He overcame all training, survived the trial of the grasses, survived the assault on Kaer Morhen, when the bloodthirsty militia decided to kill all the Witchers. And in the end, he stepped on the path of a true monster hunter, like Geralt of Rivia. Why of Rivia? Well, for a long time Geralt thought that Rivia was chosen by chance, just because a Witcher with no home would be less trusted by the common people than a Witcher who at least knew his homeland. Rivia was in the far southeast of the northern kingdoms, so the chance that someone would try to check if Geralt really had relatives in Rivia was not too big at all. Let's clear things up. At the beginning, Geralt wanted to choose the name himself. After thinking about it for a long time, he made the really unusual choice, Geralt Roger Eric Duhad Belgar. But this choice was rejected by Vesemir as silly and pretentious, so Geralt was all that remained of his chosen name. In an effort to find at least an illusory homeland, Geralt not only called himself a native of Rivia, he also learned to imitate the Rivian accent, although he had actually nothing to do with this city. His choice was made by a method of improvised sorting. Geralt collected some branches from a tree. Then he marked each twig with a random city name and simply chose one with his eyes closed. Thus, the fate of a young Witcher was pointed out with a hometown. That's how Geralt of Nowhere became Geralt of Rivia. At that time, the young Witcher did not even think about how brutally destiny would play with him in the future. Geralt the Knight. This happened on August 31st of the year 1267 of the mainland's timeline, during the time when the Second Northern War took place. The war between the northern kingdoms and Nilfgaard was very brutal, as any great war is, of course, and cut through the lands of Lyria and Rivia like a scythe of death. Queen Maeve, the ruler of Lyria and Rivia, although she lost the war on the official level because Lyria and Rivia became vassals of the great Nilfgaardian Empire, waged a large-scale guerrilla war, leading a loyal people of the kingdoms. She destroyed the logistic columns of the Nilfgaardian army and hunted down the small squads of the Empire forces. During this time, Geralt traveled to the south. He searched for druids of Caed who must have had the information about Ciri. The daughter of the Elder Blood disappeared from the radar of all kings who tried to find her, but this did not stop Geralt. He had to find Ciri, his child of surprise. During his journey, Geralt put together a team of real adventurers: the vampire Regis, the archer Milva, the Nilfgaardian knight Cahir, who always said that he was not a Nilfgaardian, and of course the bard Dandelion. With them, Geralt never lost hope to find Ciri, but destiny had many big surprises in store for him in this journey. At some point, Geralt's path crossed with that of Queen Maeve, mistress of Lyria and Rivia. This happened in Angren, on the bridge over the Yaruga River. The heroic story was written by chance. Geralt's party got into a hellish battle between partisans of Queen Maeve and the Nilfgaardian army. In such situation, there is no good way out. Fight to the death, die ingloriously, or surrender to the mercy of the enemy. These were the only options. The last one was not an option at all. The adventurers could not even run. In order to hide from this great battle, they must have known about it long before it began. This battle took place on the last day of August during the Great War. It was fought in Angren, on the bridge connecting the two banks of the Yaruga River, near a fortress called Red Binduga. The forces in this armed conflict were the army of Nilfgaard, the army corps of Lyria, led by Queen Maeve, and us, our wonderful company. Myself, the writer of these lines, the Witcher Geralt, the vampire Emil Regis Rahilet Terzi of Godfroy, the archer Maria Bering, nicknamed Milva, and Cahir Mar Diffin Aebkealak, an Nilfgaardian who, with a stubbornness worthy of a better cause, tended to emphasize that he was not a Nilfgaardian. Furthermore, the archer Milva turned out to be pregnant. She hid her pregnancy during the whole journey with Geralt's group. Stress and dangerous adventures were the reasons for Milva's miscarriage, and even the centuries-old experience of a vampire herbalist was no help in saving the child. But Regis tried, and Geralt with Cahir had to defend Milva and Regis. Thus, they didn't even have a moral choice whether to fight or not. Two strangers suddenly entered the ranks of the Lyrian and Rivian troops and tipped the scale of the battle in their favor. Maeve's forces successfully defended the bridge over Yaruga, and the rebel army was able to retreat from one side of the river to the other. The Nilfgaard army proved unwilling to storm the bridge, and after suffering heavy casualties, the Imperial forces retreated from their positions. Thus, the Battle of the Yaruga Bridge was won by Queen Maeve's forces. After the battle, Queen Maeve was stunned by what had happened. She visited Geralt and his friends and gave the Witcher the status of a knight for his bravery and fearlessness. From that moment on, our White Wolf was officially called Geralt of Rivia, the Knight of the Kingdoms of Lyria and Rivia. What an irony, right? Finally, Geralt could call himself Geralt of Rivia without thinking that he was actually lying.
The Queen felt Geralt merited the highest honor, a knighthood. Another monarch might have delayed until a more opportune time, but not Maeve. Maeve delayed nothing.
Count Odo, you, sir, do the honors. Alas, I cannot because of my tooth.
For valor shown in battle, I, Maeve, by the gods' grace, Queen of Lyria and Rivia, hereby do knight thee.
Geralt of Praise Unknown, the bridge you felled with men from Rivia. Or so you guess. I guess it falls to me to dub thee Geralt of Rivia.
Of course, Maeve demanded that Geralt, since he became a knight, continued to serve in her army, and of course the Witcher could not do that. He had to find his child of surprise, Ciri. One night, under the cover of darkness, himself and his friends ran away from the Lyrian army camp, and Maeve called him a coward, but she didn't take away the knight's status from the White Wolf and let the Witcher bear his knight's name, Geralt of Rivia. It's a bit of an irony, isn't it? And it's also an evil irony that 98% of the Old Witch listeners are not subscribed to the channel. Just like Destiny kept Geralt connected to Rivia, YouTube's algorithms keep you connected to our channel for a reason. Do subscribe and do not resist Destiny like the White Wolf did, because Destiny will find you anyway. Meanwhile, we continue. Geralt's death. In the following months, after the battle for the bridge over the Yaruga, the most amazing things happened on the continent. Geralt went a really long way. He fought wizards, Nilfgaardian soldiers, kings, powerful mercenaries and monsters, of course. He lost his friends, and in the end he found Ciri and saved Yennefer. We will definitely tell these stories in the future. Do leave a comment about what Geralt's story should be told next, because now we will return to our Rivia. To Rivia and the cruel fate of the Witcher that bound the White Wolf to this distant city forever. So after all the adventures, after finding Ciri and Yennefer, Geralt had to take some time off from his dearest people. They decided to meet again in Rivia. Why in Rivia? Well, this was just a game of destiny. Geralt had friends waiting for him in Rivia, the dwarves Yarpen Zigrin and Zoltan Kivai, so he took advantage of their hospitality and went to their house to wait for Ciri and Yennefer. The dwarves remembered the good old days when they traveled with the Witcher and even began to sort of daydream about the future. The war was over, and a new peaceful life had to begin real soon. That was the end of Geralt's active story. But destiny had other plans. The path of the White Wolf began with the name Rivia, and so his story had to end in this city. In the afternoon, just before Ciri, Yennefer and Triss arrived, a terrible massacre took place in the streets of Rivia. Relations between the human and non-human races have always been difficult. The people of the Northern Kingdoms had many reasons to hate anyone who did not look like them. Xenophobia became a systematic thing in human society. It was fostered both by the governments of the Northern Kingdoms and by the criminal actions of the Scoia'tael gangs, who committed many atrocities in Rivia, Temeria, and other kingdoms. The terrible hatred between the different races of the continent also had a strong historical background. Humans had occupied the territories that had been inhabited by dwarves, gnomes, and elves. Humans had driven the other races from their homelands, and they had done so in many different ways, from war victories to outright genocide. They often slaughtered entire elven cities in order to rebuild human fortresses on the elven bones. The memory of these tragedies was etched into the subcortex of the non-human consciousness. Human civilization grew fast. Scoia'taels who resisted this state of affairs were fierce enemies and were constantly exterminated. All other non-humans were also perceived as pure evil in the minds of most citizens of the Northern Kingdoms. At the same time, elves, dwarves, and all other races were forced to adapt to the human world and learn to live in it. They no longer had homelands to live outside the human world. Thus, the races that had to live in the same cities ended up hating each other to death. Against the background of poverty caused by the recent war, it was only a matter of time before something would break out in Rivia. War-torn people, many of whom had lost their homes, friends, parents, husbands, or children, who were on the verge of survival, on the verge of wanting to live. They searched for those responsible for their troubles, and surely they chose non-humans as the culprits. This is what happened in Rivia. What an irony it was that the riots started on the very day Geralt arrived in his chosen hometown. It was later claimed that the tragic events of Rivia were an unfortunate coincidence, a spontaneous reaction, a sudden and unpredictable outburst of justified anger caused by the hostility of the dwarves and elves towards the humans of the city. It was argued that it was not the humans who attacked first, but the dwarves who provoked the violence. A dwarven heckler insulted the noble lady Nadia Esposito, a war orphan, and resorted to violence against her. Later, when the nobles came to the defense of their friend, the dwarf called on his relatives. An argument ensued, which soon turned into a real battle that engulfed the entire bazaar in a moment. The battle became a bloodbath, with the humans launching a massive attack on the non-human neighborhoods and the elves' neighborhood as well. In less than an hour from the bazaar incident to the sorceress's intervention, 170 people were killed. About half of them were women and children. This version of events is reflected in the works of Professor Emmerich Gottschalk of Oxenfurt, but there are other opinions that state differently. How could this be spontaneous, this unpredictable explosion? Within minutes, there were carts in the streets of the bazaar distributing weapons among the human fighters. Where did the sudden righteous anger of this mob come from? The mob whose most visible and active members at the time of the massacre were people no one knew, who had arrived in Rivia only a few days before the incident and who disappeared without a trace. Why did the military intervene so late, and why did they do it with such reluctance? As the years passed, no one could exactly say how it all began. Everyone will have his version of the tragedy, as always after similar events. Everyone will agree on one thing though. That night in Rivia was terrible and bloody. Many humans and non-humans died, and a witcher named Geralt of Rivia was among the victims of a massacre. When it all began, the White Wolf decided to defend the innocent dwarves and elves. He raised his sword and stayed between the angry crowd and the feared non-humans. He tried not to kill, only to wound, but he was confident and tough. Eventually, the angry crowd threw all their anger at him. After all, the Witcher was also a god-hated non-human, a mutant with cat's eyes, a bastard like any other dwarf or elf. A battle began. In the chaos of this battle, Geralt hesitated for a moment. He saw the eyes of a young lad who wasn't supposed to die that day. The White Wolf did not want to take his life, but this short hesitation was a cruel mistake. Just one moment was enough for the nameless man. The coward had raised his pitchfork and pierced the Witcher's chest. "Mercy!" said a boy on his knees before him, peering through his disabled hair. "Mercy!" Geralt spared him, stopped his arm and sword, and used the attacking impulse to complete his turn. On the corner of the eye, he saw that same young man with a grin on his face and saw what he held in his hands. He changed direction and tried to escape, but he was caught in the crowd, and for a split second, he was trapped in that crowd. He could only look at the pitchfork flying towards his body. Geralt was injured, seriously, mortally, here in Rivia, in the city that destiny had chosen for him. At that time, Ciri, Yennefer, and Triss were on the streets of the city. They only needed a few minutes more to be in time to help Geralt. They made their way through the streets of the crazy city and were confronted with the main part of the massacre, hundreds of angry people. The sorceresses stopped the bloodthirsty crowd with the help of powerful magic. Triss Merigold created her most famous spell, Merigold's Hailstorm, and made people hide in their houses from the merciless calamity. But they didn't have time for Geralt. He was bleeding right on the stones of the street. Yennefer ran to him immediately. In order to save her loved man, she gave everything, all her magic, all her life force, and even a little bit more. But it was too late. Yennefer died with Geralt, trying to save him until the last second of her life. Right there in Rivia, on one of the streets of the city, the hearts of the Witcher Geralt of Rivia and the sorceress Yennefer of Vengerberg stopped beating at the same time. Rivia was the first city that came to the mind of the young Witcher Geralt of Nowhere, and Rivia was the last city in White Wolf's life. According to the books, of course. Because no matter what, thank God we have a game trilogy, so the story of Geralt of Rivia did not end on that day, at least for the fans of the games. But of course, Rivia will always remain the most iconic city in the White Wolf's life. And what do you guys think about Geralt's fate? Do share your thoughts in the comments, or write what topic in the history of the Witcher world you guys are most interested in. Do like this video and subscribe, of course. The Old Witcher will continue to tell interesting stories about the world of the Witcher on this channel, so every subscription is very important. As you guys can see, Rivia is the most important city in Geralt's life, for many reasons. Rivia became the symbol of the Witchers. That's why in the story of the game trilogy by the CD Projekt Red studio, the name Geralt of Rivia does not look like just a fictional nickname. In fact, it hides a deep story of an incredible character. Geralt's last name is a part of his destiny, one of his many swords of destiny. We wish you all the best, dear friends, so do have a nice day, find your own sword of destiny, and see you soon when the Old Witcher speaks once more.